Dicen que acá hay otra cámara, tenemos acá otra cámara de luces. Quedar aquí, pero me habían dicho que 12:45, pero que iban tarde. See, things haven't changed. It's crazy. Good job making it though. see a box over there?
Blue bag, and you'll see a free mic.
Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, channel one, channel one, channel one. No, this is me on channel one, mic. Christina Gonzalez. So I put the podium.
was kind of foreshadowing this announcement today.
And if you remember, shortly after the interview with Crowley and Gigi, there was some false information that had come out where there were claims that the mayor had fired Chief Crowley, and that immediately was walked back, and they said that's not true, that's not the case. We're going to stick together. We need to be a united front. That was the message from the mayor's office. Right. As we get through this crisis, we have to come together. And the very following day, we saw the mayor and Chief Crowley at a news conference standing side by side. And although you could see there was some tension, obviously, they proceeded to get through the weeks of events that preceded and followed. We do have some sound right now that we can refresh your memory and play again. This is Gigi Graciette interviewing Chief Crowley.
What is your message to city administrators, starting with Mayor Bass?
My message is the fire department needs to be properly funded.
And it's not.
It's not at this point, and we've got the justification. We know where our gaps in service are. We know we need 62 new fire stations. We need to double the size of our firefighters. The growth of this city since 1960 has doubled, and we have less fire stations.
The mayor said it didn't affect your ability to respond. Did it affect LA City Fire's ability to respond, starting with the Palisade Fire and then this domino effect of fires, including the Archer Fire that we're seeing happen right now in Granada Hills?
Yeah, I think obviously any budget cut is going to impact our ability to provide service. That's at this point, that is a ground truth in regard to our ability. If there's a budget cut, we had to pull from somewhere else. What does that mean? That doesn't get done. There's delays.
What was going through your heart?
What's going through my heart is that our firefighters, the community's firefighters, LAFD firefighters need to be properly funded. We need to be supported so that they can do their jobs.
All right,
that's
January 10th.
Wow, yeah. And obviously they needed to show a united front because we were in the thick of it. The fire situation was still going on. The flames were still burning at that point, right? And so clearly the mayor having to make that decision to show a united front with the fire chief at that point. But now we're talking about more than a month after these fires have been put out, and this decision to remove Kristin Crowley effective immediately.
We'll work and see if we can get the sound from Alex Michelson's interview with Mayor Bass, where she answered some of his questions regarding all of this. In the meantime, we're also working to see if we can get Gigi Graciette on the phone to talk to her about that interview that you just saw parts of and just everything that's happened. Is a story she's been following very closely. Okay, perfect. Getting word that Gigi is now on the phone joining us. Gigi, hi. Good afternoon. Sorry to call you. I know you were probably on your way home, but your reaction to the news that just came down.
Well, good afternoon, Araxia. Good afternoon, everyone. This was probably the worst kept secret at City Hall. Everyone knew that it was just a matter of time and finding a reason for Mayor Karen Bass to fire LA City Fire Chief Kristin Crowley. As you saw there, the chief spoke her truth on Fox 11 in a 16-minute live interview, and including that she felt the city had failed the Los Angeles City Fire Department and, in turn, residents. And the fire chief spoke about warning for years, and she has a very long paper trail of documents presented to the Fire Commission and to the city of Los Angeles where she warned that the fire department's ability to respond to a major emergency in Los Angeles could be compromised because they are seriously understaffed. They don't even meet the staffing requirements set nationally for firefighters. And just this week before the Fire Commission, a LA City fire official told them that they are not able to respond to 911 emergencies in the suggested 4-minute timeline. I think less than half the time they're able to respond because they just don't have the man and woman power to do so. They don't have enough stations. They just don't have it. So not surprised. It was just a matter of timing. And I'm sure the chief was not surprised either.
You know, one of the things that stood out to me during that interview where you spoke to her, and for 16 minutes, it was just riveting. I remember sitting here in the studio watching this because you were getting all of this information, and she said, you know, finally she's able to speak on this, and you could tell almost like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders as she was talking. One thing she said was, as the city has grown, as the population has grown, as everything has grown, the department, rather than growing, has shrunk.
I know. How is that, even for those of us that aren't good at math? How can it be that we have less fire stations now than we had 10, 20, 30 years ago? It just doesn't make sense.
And Gigi, your thoughts on Mayor Bass? Alex interviewed her, asked her tough questions as to why she went to that trip to Ghana, and knowing that there was this big wind event coming up, and she says she wasn't informed, that she actually mentioned Kristin Crowley did not tell her the severity of the events coming up and the preparedness in place. Your thoughts on what the mayor had to say in that interview?
You know, it was a great interview by Alex Michelson, and just as a resident of Los Angeles, I grew up in Hollywood. This has been my city all my life. I was shocked when the mayor said that the fire chief hadn't called her personally to warn her, when we all knew, as Alex clearly said in that interview, we in the news media, every single station, had been talking about this for days. The National Weather Service, please keep in mind that the mayor of such a big city as Los Angeles is, has a very large staff, has advisors, has consultants, has assistants, has, you know, administrative assistants. She's got a lot of people who advise her on the matters of the city, because it would be impossible for one person to know everything that's going on. So she's got an entire staff that I'm sure discussed this with her, and she chose to make a trip out of the country. And then in turn, in that interview with Alex Michelson, said that she didn't know that the fire chief had not called her. And I was just taken aback, and I thought, well, is that how they're supposed to do political business? Does the fire chief have to, like, pick up a telephone and call the mayor? The mayor doesn't get any other advisements about what's happening?
And it was very telling, though, that she named Kristin Crowley, as a matter of fact, in that interview, in just the one name that she said, you know, putting the blame squarely on her. Gigi, thank you. Just a second here, because we want to go to...
Well, I just want to say, don't hang up. Don't hang up. Just stay with us for one moment.
We're going to go and listen to that sound from Alex's interview with Mayor Bass.
What was the thought process behind going to Ghana?
So let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, when the White House called and asked me if I would represent the president, I said yes. It was going to be a very, very short trip, over a weekend and 2 business days. We need to look at everything about the preparation and all of that for the fires, because I think when we evaluate that, we will find that although there were warnings that I frankly wasn't aware of, although there were warnings, I think our preparation, it wasn't what it typically is, meaning that before there's a major weather event, for example, last week when we knew we were going to get into the rains, you saw us come together and us talk about, you know, get your sandbags, bring the K-rails out. That type of preparation didn't happen. If that had, I will tell you, Alex, I wouldn't have even gone to San Diego, let alone leave the country.
But what do you mean there were warnings you weren't aware of? Because I know we were talking about it on the news. A lot of people were talking about the problems, warning that this was going to be a huge deal.
So when I talked about it with the fire chief, what she said is that we have warnings of Santa Ana winds a lot, but predicting this, and you saw, from the city, from the county, that level of preparation really didn't happen. So it didn't reach that level to me to say something terrible could happen and maybe you shouldn't have gone on the trip.
Why didn't it
But to
happen?
me, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's one of the things we need to look at. I will tell you that I felt absolutely terrible not being here for my city and not being here for my family, who was impacted by the fires as well. And so when I say it was a mistake, absolutely, the idea that I was not present was very painful.
So very telling in that interview, obviously blaming the chief for not giving her ample warning, for not being prepared in terms of the alert level to alert the mayor that this was going to be a severe weather event.
But Gigi, you bring up a good point, and I believe you're still here, that you were surprised to know that in your mind you're thinking, does the fire chief have to call you personally to tell you when the entire city is talking about this big wind event that is coming and the dangers that we as a community face?
Exactly. And I think there's one thing everybody can agree with, no matter what side of the political aisle that you're on, is that a full after-action report, investigation by an independent source has to be done, and everyone's role in what happened in the Palisades, and also, you know, in the county area, of course, with the Eaton fire, but particularly with relevance to the city of Los Angeles, a complete investigation has to be done into every department that was involved in the Palisades fire, and that obviously includes LA City Fire and the mayor's office. And the mayor has repeatedly said that she hasn't wanted to comment about things until the investigation is complete. But now she's decided to fire the LA City Fire Chief before the outside independent investigation is complete.
Well, it's interesting. In her tweet regarding all of this, she says that Kristin Crowley refused to do an after-action report. So
I think the most important report is going to be the independent one.
Yeah.
Not the one that comes from the, you know, from the mayor's office, not the report that comes from LA City Fire. Those are important, obviously, but an independent entity investigating if the fire department, if the city failed the residents impacted by the fire. You know, we're talking about the Palisades, we're talking about Malibu. Did they fail in somehow? Did the state fail them? Did the people who control the reservoir that was empty fail them? We need a complete investigation. We need to know, and we need to learn if there were mistakes. I think we can all agree on that. No one is subject to not being part of this investigation. From the chief of the fire department to the mayor's office, we need to know what happened and if they could have done better, all of them. I'm surprised that the mayor has decided, after repeatedly saying she wouldn't address questions about what happened until that investigation was done, that now she's saying she's going to fire the LA City Fire Chief before any independent investigation is done. That would be the only thing that would surprise me. Other than that, again, as I said in the beginning, this has been LA City Hall's worst-kept secret. Everyone in the mayor's office and our sources have long known that the mayor wanted to fire the chief. After the chief spoke out, with her truth. And she has a very long paper trail. And I can tell you she's not the only one in the Los Angeles City Fire Department that has been speaking about being understaffed, under-resourced, not having enough stations to service an area, a city as large as Los Angeles.
All right, so Gigi, stay on the phone if you can. Alex is actually here right now with us, joining us. Alex, thank you for stepping into the studio earlier than you'd planned. Your reaction, and you're saying you're not surprised.
Not surprised, based off of what we heard the other day in that interview that the mayor gave to Fox 11. She was laying the groundwork for why she thought that Kristin Crowley was to blame for a lot of this. When I asked her directly about her assessment of Kristin Crowley, she did not say anything positive, basically said, we're going to see. Gigi's point is correct, this idea of waiting for the investigation to be completed. I think what you said, though, is key. If you look at her statement, she's saying that Kristin Crowley's not participating in the investigation, so the investigation can't go forward without her participation. So because of that, that gives her the out to get rid of her now. But it is clear that there was no love lost between Kristin Crowley and LA Mayor Karen Bass. This also allows Mayor Bass to sort of change the story a bit from that interview that we did the other day, which has not garnered the greatest reviews for her from a lot of folks, especially folks on the right that may not have been big fans of her to begin with. But it is somebody did something wrong. And the question is, who's to blame? Because if you look at the situation, there are a lot of things that are true. There were not firefighters pre-deployed to Pacific Palisades. There were 1,000 firefighters who could have been on the job who were not on the job. Why did that happen? What was going on with the reservoirs that weren't completed? Why were fire hydrants not working in the area? All those things are real questions that need answers, and Chief Crowley hasn't really given many answers to that. Mayor Bass didn't really have any answers other than to say that we've got to investigate all of that. But it is easy to believe that it would have been hard to completely stop a fire with 100-mile-an-hour winds the way that that happened. But it is also objectively true that if some of those things happened that I just said, there would have been less damage. There didn't necessarily have to be 7,000 homes that burned.
Right.
Maybe it was a few hundred. But we saw for hours being on the air that there were no firefighters there. And when some of them arrived, there was no water for them. And so there was nothing that they could do. We just watched them continuously watch homes burn. And our reporters are out there, and it was devastating to see. And there are real questions about how did that happen and who's responsible for that.
I mean, again, the point is made, yes, this was an insane weather situation. The winds just erratic, right? The circumstances were something we had never seen. There's no arguing that, absolutely. But at the same time, when we live in a wildfire-prone area, our job as a citizen of this community, you have an expectation that everything needs to be lined up and you need to be armed and prepared for something of this magnitude.
Yeah, and what the mayor was kind of trying to say, and I got more clarity on what she was trying to say afterwards, because I think that message was lost to a lot of people, was that it is usually the standard operating procedure in a big weather event like this for the fire chief to call either the mayor or the mayor's chief of staff and come up with a plan to deal with this sort of thing and give them a warning. Hey, this is a big deal. Let's talk about this. Here's the plan. That didn't happen, according to Mayor Bass. Mayor Bass says the first time that she talked to Kristin Crowley on the phone about this weather event was after the Palisades fire had already begun. So that was her frustration.
Right, like 3 hours
was
after,
that
right?
why did you not reach out to me? The other question, I guess you could ask, is for Mayor Bass, why didn't you reach out to her? Especially on January 6th, when the mayor's own X account posts about the potentially dangerous situation, the extreme fire weather, and then there was apparently no conversation between them then when the mayor was already in Ghana and Crowley was here on the ground.
Actually, I have a question regarding that. So she makes a point in your interview to say she was going to go away for the weekend plus 2 extra days. And I'm trying to remember back now. It took her a long time to come back, right? How long was she gone? And the excuse
well, it's far away. I mean, yeah.
Well, of course. But the excuse was she was taking a military helicopter. Is that why?
She took a military plane back to, I think she went to Washington first, got off the plane, and then came back here afterwards. I think in Washington is where that Sky News reporter, had that moment with her asking for her message, and then she didn't really have anything at all, which went super viral at the time. But the reason that they took the military plane is you were able to travel faster. She also had full communications that entire time, and so she was able to be on the phone with officials. We asked her, I certainly did, to call into our station or call into any of the local stations to try to get the message out at that moment too, if she did have access to communication, and she declined our offer then. Only time that she sat down with us was this week, 6 weeks later.
Right, and at that time, she had said, I was in constant communication with my team. I was on a military plane. I had full control and knew what was happening. Very different message now, though, in terms of like the communication and the information. I just wonder if this is politics at play. Obviously, the blame game is going on. Would this be the situation today if Kristin Crowley, the fire chief, did not come out on January 10th and say that they were underfunded?
I don't know, and I don't know if we can know that. But I think it's also objectively true that there are real questions about her job performance.
Oh, definitely.
Based off of what we see. And this is no insult to the firefighters on the ground who are the best among us and the heroes, and we all love them.
Yes.
But I think there are real questions about the fire department leadership and the fire strategy. And the question, knowing this forecast, to have no firefighters pre-deployed to Pacific Palisades is a curious decision. I mean, think about it. I mean, Rick Caruso had firefighters pre-deployed and paid for them.
Well, yes,
other
but not everyone is Rick Caruso can afford something like that. But yes, you make a point. Is Gigi still on the phone with us?
I am.
Okay.
And you know, Roxy and Sandra and Alex, I wanted to add something because the mayor said that she wasn't notified. I asked LA City Fire to respond to Alex's interview and the comments the mayor made. And in the midst of a written statement, it clearly said, and I'm looking at their response right now, that prior to the Palisades fire starting, the LAFD, they talk about media advisories, multiple live and recorded media interviews, but they also say they notified city officials about the upcoming weather event. So they say, the city, LA City Fire, this statement is not from Kristin Crowley direct, it is from the fire department as a whole through their media department, that they notified city officials about the upcoming weather event.
Right. And so I think both things can be true at the same time, because I think what the mayor's team is saying is that there wasn't a direct conversation between Crowley and Bass, or Crowley and even the mayor's chief of staff. And so that was, the question is, who may have been talking to each other at the, in Washington, they would call the sub-cabinet level, the lower jobs, but the principals, the main people, were not in communication. And Crowley's, in the LAFD statement, did not claim that Crowley did call Bass. And that was Bass's frustration. But that's a lot of inside baseball stuff and bureaucracy stuff. And I don't know how many viewers even really care about that. The bigger question is, what happened in terms of the response? And what lessons can we learn from the response going forward so a situation like this doesn't happen again?
And what needs to happen for a city like Los Angeles to be equipped for something like this? Gigi, I remember after that interview aired, I believe that evening, you were doing a phone interview with Alex and Marla. And you provided great insight to some of the frustrations that you have heard from firefighters themselves. And if I can make you recall some of what you said, really stuck out to me. You talked a little bit about how many firefighters have been frustrated over the years when they do get called out to a situation, that they are encouraged, I believe, or the city would prefer for them not to talk about why the fire started. Can you go into a little detail there? It had to do with, I believe, homeless encampments, if that rings a bell.
Yes, of course, because we've covered multiple fires that have been started in a homeless encampment, but you will very rarely see a firefighter in a televised interview say that. And there are, as Alex mentioned, there's a lot of inside baseball, a lot of politics at play. But basically what high-ranking fire officials, and I'm not referring to the Chief Kristin Crowley, I'm not referring to her, but high-ranking fire chiefs, battalion chiefs, captains, etc., have basically told me that the city has told them not to say the word homeless. The word is unhoused. That is the word they have been instructed to use. And they are not, even though when they know for a fact how a fire started, if it was indeed connected to an encampment or to an unhoused individual, they are not to say that. They are just to say it's under investigation. And this has had many fire chiefs, many battalion chiefs, many captains extremely frustrated to see their men, their women risking their lives on fires. There was a fire in Van Nuys on Sepulveda Boulevard. I think it was about the 8,000 block. It's an abandoned office building. That site has been taken over by encampments repeatedly. And it was there that a battalion chief told me, we've been to this one building 10 times, and I'm not allowed to speak out about what's happening here, that they keep starting, the unhoused individuals that were calling that, building home, had started warming fires to keep warm, and that fire had spread to the building.
And the number, Gigi, of fires that we see started this way is significant. I mean, as somebody who listens to the scanner every day, I mean, this is a huge problem.
It is a huge issue for the fire department. But the men and women of the fire department repeatedly have told me on the streets of Los Angeles they are not to talk about it with the media. They're not to talk about it in public. And that's just part of the politics at play here. And there are a lot, like Alex said, a lot of politics.
And Gigi, to your point of wanting that independent investigation done and what eventually they find is a big deal, because I remember in your interview with Kristin Crowley, she had mentioned that that reservoir that's near the Palisades was empty, but she was not aware of it. Nobody from the Department of Water told the fire department that that, in fact, was not going to be available during that time, and it was, in fact, empty and not a resource for the fire department. So not only was the fire department dealing with their own issues, but resources available to them, the water issue, and, you know, there's a whole long list, I'm sure, when this independent investigation is done as to what the response was and what went wrong.
And on that water point, because one of the things that Bass said to me in the interview was basically that reservoir was for drinking water, so that would not have been helpful for the response. I heard from water experts who told me that's not true. That if that thing was there, that it would have...
Water is water. You're going to use the water.
And it would have impacted the water pressure situation. And so that sort of demonstrated perhaps a lack of understanding of how the system actually works.
You had them using the water from the ocean because you just needed water.
From lakes, oceans, reservoirs. Water is water. Whether it has salt in it, it doesn't have salt, or fluoride in it, doesn't matter. When you have a fire and you need water, any kind of water is going to help, as opposed to no water at all.
I mean, you remember people were using water bottles. I mean, it's if you remember that scene, it's embarrassing almost that that's what it had come to. People using pool water, people using water bottles trying to put the fire out.
So here we go.
And actually, firefighters...
Gigi, we're going to cut you off. We're going to the mayor right now.
Thank you, Gigi. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Acting in the best interest of Los Angeles public safety and for the operations of the Los Angeles Fire Department, I just met with Chief Crowley and removed her as fire chief. I have appointed a 41-year veteran of the fire department, former Chief Deputy Ronald Villanueva, as interim fire chief. He is respected and ready to hit the ground running. So let me be clear. Our firefighters acted heroically during the Palisades fire, and they act heroically every single day. That is without question. Bringing new leadership to the fire department is what they and the people of Los Angeles deserve. As you know, I have called for a full investigation of everything leading up to January 7th. A necessary step to the investigation was the president of the Fire Commission telling Chief Crowley to do an after-action report on the fires. The fire chief refused. We all know that 1,000 firefighters that could have been on duty on the morning the fires broke were instead sent home on Chief Crowley's watch. These actions required her removal. While the department is in the experienced and expert hands of Chief Villanueva, my office will lead a national search, and I will speak directly with firefighters and Angelenos about what they want to see in the next fire chief. I will use a similar process as I did in searching for our police chief. The business of the fire department and the city will continue. Our heroic firefighters are on the job in our firehouses, engines, trucks, and ambulances. The recovery of the Palisades is months ahead of expectations. Los Angeles is moving forward on all fronts, and we will keep moving forward together. I'd now like to introduce the Chief of the Los Angeles Fire Department, Ronnie Villanueva.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I am humbled by your confidence in me. I've spent 41 years at the Los Angeles City Fire Department, working alongside the finest fire professionals in the world. Leading them is an honor of a lifetime. I pledge to the mayor, our firefighters, and to the people of Los Angeles is that the Los Angeles City Fire Department will be prepared. The Los Angeles City Fire Department will respond, and the Los Angeles City Fire Department will keep you safe. And to all the firefighters, I want you to know the love that I have for this department is the reason I'm coming back in this capacity. I watched last month as you were in the fiercest firefight in Los Angeles history, bravely battling the fires for days on end. I am grateful to work alongside all of you once again. Thank you very much.
And before I open it up for questions, let me acknowledge the President of the City Council, Marquise Harris Dawson, Councilmember Curran Price, Councilmember Hugo Soto Martinez, Councilmember Adrienne Nazarian. Yes.
Well, I've got a question for you. You said that removing Chief Crowley is in the best interest of Los Angeles public safety. What specifically did she do to endanger public safety?
Well, as I mentioned, 1,000 firefighters who could have been on the job fighting the fires were sent home. The other thing that I mentioned is that I said after the fires were out, after the rain had stopped, that a full investigation would begin. One step of that investigation was to do an after-action report, of which she refused.
So we knew the 1,000 firefighters could have been called in the day after the fire. What changed?
What changed?
Because you said you weren't planning on firing her on January 11th.
Oh, well, let me just be clear. As I just said, while Los Angeles was on fire, after that we had rains. I was not going to do anything while we were in a state of emergency. Next.
Are we still in a state of emergency?
No, we are not in a state of emergency right now. Next question.
Mayor.
Yes.
The chief, I assume you met, I assume this is not a decision you made this morning. When did you meet with Chief Crowley, former Chief Crowley?
About an hour ago.
And how did the meeting go?
It was very brief.
And did she tell you anything about why she did what she did?
It was a very brief meeting, no.
And the investigation
Yes.
that she didn't participate in?
Yes.
How did she not participate?
Well, what I said is that the president of the Fire Commission told her to do a after-action report. She refused to do the report.
Did she give a reason for refusing?
Next.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Did the former chief ever talk about, what plan was in place, where she had positioned the firefighters? Is that becoming clear to you?
No, it is not. Next question. Yes.
Is the city required to do an after-action report under Title 19?
Yes, it is required. I don't know about the title that you just mentioned, but yes, it is.
Do you understand that the LA County Fire Department is doing?
I do not know that.
Okay.
Yes?
You have said that Chief Crowley did not call and inform your office ahead of time as they have done with previous fires. I'm wondering, what's the person they called before previous fires? You think you made our public safety Brian Williams who's on leave?
What I can tell you is that what has happened in the 2+ years I've been here, every time there was a weather emergency or even a hint of a weather emergency, the chief has called me directly. She has my cell phone. She knows she can call me 24/7. And she briefed me, and then we would talk about what needed to happen next. That did not happen this time. Yes.
You had no idea
Yes.
before you went to Ghana?
Excuse me? Yes.
When exactly was it that you asked her, well, that she was asked to do the after-action report, and what was her justification?
I don't know her justification. She was asked this week. I learned about this yesterday.
She was asked this week?
Yeah, it was this week. Yes.
Are you saying you hadn't seen any of the forecasts before you went to Ghana?
Yes.
What was the reasoning for not having the 1,000 firefighters?
I don't know. I don't know what the reason was.
Did you
Yes.
see any of the forecasts before you went to Ghana?
No.
No, you didn't?
Yes.
When did you first speak to her on the 7th or 8th? When did you connect?
I spoke to her the evening of the 7th.
Evening of the 7th?
Yes.
Ghana time, or-
Exactly, which was the morning here. So it was after the fires started. But let me just be clear. Los Angeles needs to move forward. This is a new day. I am excited to welcome our new chief, who was a 41-year veteran of this fire department. He is well known. He is well liked. He knows most of the members of the city council, except for our 2 members that were recently elected. And it is our plan to continue moving forward. We want to have the full investigation that the governor has ordered and the investigation that we will do locally. Yes?
Thank you again. I wanted to back it up a little bit because I think you actually spoke with the chief, because I heard it live on KNX News at 12:47 p.m. local time. You're in West Africa, the chief is here, and you're on KNX News talking about the fire disaster, and you're praising Chief Crowley for pre-positioning units that were necessary in vulnerable places. You're also praising her leadership, and you said something to the effect that LAFD is always at the ready.
And needless to say, I did not know all the facts, but I had spoken to her maybe a couple of hours before that. Yes?
And, 2 quick questions. In terms of investigations, and since we're looking at the fire, has there been calls for the firing of PWB's chief over the issue of the reservoirs being empty up in that area? Are you looking into that? Is that a possibility?
There will be an investigation of the water situation as well, and that will be done by the governor.
The same thing with the issue of fire hydrants?
Yes. All of that is being examined at the governor's initiation, and we might do something locally as well.
And to those who might say that your step now, as explained as it is, it's also a reaction to her criticism to your office about the budget and what it's under.
Let me just be clear about the budget. The fire department was not cut. I have done 2 budgets in my time here. In both budgets, the budget was increased, and I will anticipate that it will be increased this time as well.
I see you have 4 members of City Council behind you.
I'm sorry?
I see 4 members of City Council behind you. Do you expect that other members of City Council will fight the ouster? I believe Monica Rodriguez is planning to fight it. Do you think that you have enough support on the council to avoid getting a 10 vote over?
I believe that there is a lot of support on the city council. Yes?
Does this add to the sense of upheaval that has been going on for the last 5 weeks? You've had tensions with Lindsay Horvath, you've had back and forth over Steve Soberoff's pay. This now is a new, potentially destabilizing event. Is the city in upheaval? Is your office?
The city is not in upheaval. I am very happy that the rebuilding, the restoration, the clearing of the fire, of the debris is moved forward way ahead of time. We have just experienced the worst natural disaster that our city has ever experienced. It would be wonderful to think that everything would be smooth every step of the way, but I don't believe that that is realistic. I think we are standing together. I think we're standing strong, as evidenced by the leadership of the City Council being here with me, with members of the City Council, and there's many more that are not here. We have worked very well together. Now, are there differences along the way? Of course they are. Yes.
Your comments about not getting a phone call from Crowley, I think that for some people, they see you as the top of the food chain. You're in charge. You're supposed to be the one getting the information from people, and you're not supposed to blame others. You're supposed to be responsible.
Let me just say that yes, as the mayor of the city, the buck stops with me. I am in charge. However, the person in charge of the fire department, as I mentioned before, whenever there was a fire emergency, a weather emergency, or a hint of a problem, I am contacted directly, and not just by Chief Crowley, but by any of the heads of the departments. As you know, we have over 40 departments. I'll take a couple more. Yes.
My understanding is that the City Council has planned to motion its own after-action report. Was Chief Crowley participating with that investigation?
I do not know that.
Do you only get your information from your aides and chiefs and things like that, or do you watch other outside news sources?
Oh, I watch news all the time. Yes. I'm sorry? What did you say?
Any sense of where the fire unit stands on this decision?
I do not know. Okay, one final question from you. You've not asked a question.
Any plans for the department when you come in? ¿Y en español no se sabe español?
Sí lo hablo. I just plan on moving forward. I want to move the department forward and take care of our firefighters. So I don't want to look backwards. I don't want to look to the past like the mayor stated. I just want to look for the future. En español, quiero nomás que los bomberos vean el futuro y la gente también de la ciudad de Los Ángeles. Yo estoy bien orgulloso de estar en esta posición, este puesto, y doy gracias a todos. Gracias.
Thank you very much. The National Weather Service forecast at City Hall?
Thank you very much.
Do you? That's an important question because you said you didn't see it.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all of the Q&A we're going to get. You've been listening to Mayor Karen Bass there, talking about how she had a very brief, as she says, meeting with now fired Chief Kristin Crowley, and we also got to meet and see Ronnie Villanueva. He's the interim fire chief right now. 41 years of service, and he stepped out of retirement August of 2024. He just retired.
Yeah,
he's coming back to
seen him in the field for years.
To, take over this role.
Familiar face.
So the overall message and the tone from both of them is that they want to move forward. They don't want to look back. But many people in the community, as well as Chief Crowley, are probably going to want to touch on what happened and why this decision was made today.
I mean, the mayor was feisty. Next, trying to move this, clearly annoyed, seemed like, with some of the questions about this. But part of the challenge is, in order to move forward, some of these questions need to be answered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
the easiest way to move forward is to deal with it. And part of the challenge, and this is what I communicated privately to her team, for weeks trying to land this interview, was other people are speaking for you, but you're not speaking for you. And the best way to, get through this is to lay it all out there, get it on the record, and then we can move on. But that's part of the reason why people are pushing back on some of this. And some legitimate questions, especially the last question that was asked about the National Weather Service put out an alert a couple days before she went to Ghana. So did she not know about that? Or nobody talked to her about that? And was she not concerned about that? I think is a really legitimate question.
I don't think you can move forward until you have answers, right? And I think the whole community of the Palisades, of the Altadena area need answers as to why this happened, what could have been prevented, and what you need to reassure people, too, how this is not going to happen again. And that's why you just can't move forward just automatically like that.
Well, and two key questions that she did not have an answer for that would be interesting to hear if Kristin Crowley talked to anybody. Maybe she'll talk to Gigi Graciette first once again, is why weren't those 1,000? Why were there 1,000 firefighters basically sent home and not kept on overtime? Was it a budgetary cost issue? What was going on there? And why did Kristin Crowley not say yes to participating in the after-action report? I mean, clearly it didn't sound like it was a long enough call for her to ask that. Basically, it sounded like she probably said, in the old Apprentice words, you're fired, and bye. But I'm curious if Crowley comes out and shares her side of the story, because I think we all need to know that.
So one of the things we want to bring up is there is a tweet from Mayor Bass on January 6th. The National Weather Service for days had been talking about what was to come. So on January 6th, before the fire begins, before she's on her trip to Ghana.
She's in Ghana at this point.
Oh, she's in Ghana at this point.
She's in Ghana.
So she
I'm
puts
guessing
this out.
Somebody on her team has probably put this out. I doubt that Mayor Bass herself is tweeting this. And basically she says there's an expected and, potentially life-threatening windstorm starting Tuesday through Wednesday afternoon. Red flag, no parking restrictions. Sharing out the tweet from the National Weather Service. This was the particularly dangerous situation warning that we all talked about, which only happens very rarely. It's the highest level of warning that the National Weather Service puts out. So clearly somebody on her team, or whoever's managing her Twitter account, was aware of that at that point. The mayor was already in Ghana, attending functions in Ghana at that point. And so the question is, maybe should she have gone home earlier and gotten back? But I don't know if that would have made that much of a difference at that point.
The timeline is important, though, and this is something we're going to look at. You're going to be covering this throughout the evening, obviously.
All day, and then on the issue is a special edition, including our interview with her and context and all of this. A lot to unpack. So we'll have more when we join you with the news at 4 o'clock. Until then, back to regularly scheduled programming.